and welcome to the third part of the Bring Down the Chandelier Read With Me series. If you are new to this, don't watch this video. Start from the beginning. Seriously, you're coming mid-story. But if you want to continue anyways, because who is this girl telling me not to watch or what to watch? This is a Toilet-Bound Hanako fan fiction written by myself, and it's a Hanako of the Opera AU, so imagine Phantom of the Opera, but now all the characters are from the show Toilet-Bound Hanako. Well, that's what it is. And I will be reading that. But before we get to all that, first of all, new hair, right? Oh my god, nice. I'm not wearing the fancy clothes because I just came from work and I was all like, wow, I should just wear my work clothes. I look cute enough. And, yeah. So, with all that said, here's a few disclaimers. Not a professional. Oh, another thing. This chapter begins the musical section, and there will be singing. Huh! So prepare for that. So get ready for an alto singing soprano parts. In key. In whatever key that fits at the moment. So, anyways, without further ado, let's get started with Bring Down the Chandelier, Chapter 3. Next time we'll cast an understudy. This note is way too high for me. Nene sometimes felt that Hanako wanted to see her struggle. Maybe it was the knowing smirk he insisted on wearing when she arrived, or the comments he made when they worked together, but it felt as if he enjoyed giving her a hard time. And as she looked at the sheet music he gave her, she was sure of it. Nene, you're a soprano 1. There isn't a note you can't reach, Hanako said. The only person holding you back is you. Try again. Nene took a deep breath and sang the measure again. The notes taunted her. See, I was flat. I can't do it. Nene crossed her arms to face him. Hanako didn't seem to feel the same way, though he clearly shared her frustration. I wrote this specifically for you. I know you can sing it. She looked at the sheet of music again, studying it a bit closer. For me? Yes, for you. He gently took the sheet music out of her hands. Clearly you need more hands-on learning. This time, hold the note. But sing, I'll fix what needs to be fixed, but you'll have to trust me. She sighed in defeat. She didn't feel particularly sold, but she knew she couldn't necessarily quit. So she tried again, this time holding the note. Rather than immediately commenting, he felt his cold hands on her shoulders. She immediately grabbed his wrist. Hanako? She stammered, her face turning a tinge pink. Did I say to stop? He asked. But what are you? Trust me and sing. She took a deep breath, let him go, and did as he demanded. He looked at her with a sculptor's eye and had put himself to work. Pushed her shoulders back, stood back and pursed his lips. He shook his head and leaned closer to her. Their faces were a few inches apart, and yet she continued to sing. He placed his fingers on her chin, forcing her jaw to drop more. And once he felt satisfied, he stood back and motioned for her to stop. I figured out your problem, he said. And did it require you touching me? She asked, attempting to sound more annoyed than flustered. To be fair, I said you required a more hands-on approach. He smiled without an inch of shame. Hanako, she warned. Yes, it did. I wanted to see if it would help. Straightening your posture, making rounder vowels for a start, he said, slipping on his trademark black gloves. You're just scared of the note, Nene. If you just sang without hesitation, you would hit the note without so much of a thought. So, you really were just teaching me and not using it as an excuse to touch me. I'll have you know that I never had anything less than wholesome intentions. Any impure thoughts were entirely on your behalf. Nene would have thought him offended if he weren't so dramatic. Besides, he didn't even bother to hide his grin. I don't need an excuse. All you need to do is ask. Hanako, have you any shame? She blushed even deeper. This, of course, only made him laugh. Plenty, but I'm not sure what that has to do with anything, he said. You always speak so candidly with me. I don't think it's all that proper, she said. Well, as your dearest friend, always my dearest friend. As your angel, I believe we bypassed those formalities, he said. Ah, Well, I suppose so, she said. If she was being honest, she felt like she knew next to nothing about Hanako despite relying on him so much. He made her feel as if he knew something she didn't and spent more time teasing her than anything else. However, he was right. They had bypassed those formalities ages ago. They were quiet for a moment after that. She watched him slowly return to the piano. She didn't necessarily want to return to practice, so she searched for something to say. Hanako, she started, though she wasn't sure where she was going with it. Yes, mademoiselle? Aoi had told me the most interesting thing. Ah, yes, the ballet dancer, he recalled. Did she tell you the secret to having so many gentlemen friends fawn over her? No, she pouted. Aoi insisted that she had no idea why she has so many fans. It was about number 3. The opera manager, he raised an eyebrow. Why? Did somebody... The opera manager, he raised an eyebrow. Why, did somebody as self-important as him get wrapped up in some sort of scandal? Must it always be that dramatic with you? She rolled her eyes. My apologies. Continue with your story. I'm listening. He pulled his seat closer, propping up his seat with his hands much like a child, and he stared with his big brown eyes, batting his eyelashes innocently, willing for her to continue. Aoi told me that she overheard number 3 say he's retiring, she said. His eyes widened. Is that so? Starting on the day of the show, Nanny confirmed. He had a slow smile stretch across his face. Well, that's very interesting information indeed. He stood up and looked at the ceiling. He was silent for a beat. I think it's best we end for tonight. Wait, really? Nanny beamed. Don't act upset on my account, he said flatly. Nene covered her mouth, though it did little to hide the small smile underneath. Sorry. Too late, you've wounded me, he clutched his heart, dramatically stumbling on the front of the stage. I may never recover from this. Hanako. It's okay, Nene, he lamented. Just remember to live on, though you may never love like you loved me. What? Goodbye, mademoiselle! And with that, he fell over the edge, into the orchestra pit. She ran to the edge out of habit to find once again that he had disappeared. What a drama king, she muttered. It was almost as if he was getting stranger and stranger by the day. The last dress rehearsal before the show came faster than anyone could have imagined. There was some sort of restless energy that fell over the troupe. The show had to be perfect. If number 3 was really retiring, then they really needed to show the replacements just how good they were. The run of Hannibal was actually for one night. It was a new show, and number 3 insisted that they should try it out, but make it more exclusive to sell more tickets. If the show did well, the run would be longer. This was to solve the fact that the classics tend to sell better. This meant that there was only one shot for things to be perfect. Otherwise, the show died that night. And they refused to die. Mitsuba entered, footsteps echoing on the empty stage. Quick thing. I'm not going to try to sing Mitsuba's part. That mess is hard. So if I speak it... also, listen. Anyways, back to the story. This trophy from our saviors, The sound of Mitsuba's voice pierced the air. I'm not singing it, I'm sorry. He was wearing a big green and red dress with gold accents. His pink hair was perfectly styled with the jeweled crown nestled on top. He looked exactly how he expected to be treated. Like royalty. Of the enslaving force of Rome. Very beautiful, very powerful note. Imagine I sang it. Thank you. I put in so much effort. Anyways, back to the story. The music rose like a tide when Mitsuba hit a high C. Immediately, dancers came pouring out, singing in chorus. They made sure their harmony stood out and their voices were heard. It was a mirage of colors and delicate ballet dancers with contrasting, booming choruses. Once finished, they separated, announcing Natsuhiko's arrival as the title role of Hannibal. Sad to return to the land we love. Natsuhiko's voice came out loud and clear. Threatened once more by a Roma's far-reaching grasp. No! Yako screeched, halting the music. She climbed upstage, not even bothering to take the stairs, but instead opting to climb out of the orchestra pit, much like a demon crawls from hell. Signor, how many times must I tell you? Jaco pointed her conductor's wand at him. It is Rome, not Roma. But Madam, Rome is very hard for me. It's so hard to remember because back in Italy, they always say Roma, and when I come here, it's Rome. You could see how confusing that could be. Natsuhiko whined. Jaco stared at his vacant eyes. She was sure there was nothing happening behind them. Natsuhiko? Next time this happens, I'll be shoving my wand. Careful, Jaco, she heard from the wings. She looked to see Tsuchikimori smiling lazily next to Fuji. She sent him a sharp glare, then turned her focus back to Natsuhiko, morphing her face to the fakest smile she could possibly make. Rome. Not Roma, she said sweetly. And with that, she returned to the orchestra pit. From the top, please. Everyone groaned, reluctantly going to their place. How many more times must they go over this? Natsuhiko cleared his throat. Sad to return to the land we love, threatened once more by a Rome's. He glanced nervously at Jaco, to which she smiled. Far-reaching grasp. The rest of the number continued with only minor hiccups. Natsuhiko remembered the correct way to pronounce Rome and only had a little trouble pulling out his sword towards the end. Though Mitsuba was clearly annoyed when things stopped, he only rolled his eyes at the beginning. So in all, it wasn't horrible in any way the audience would notice. That was wonderful, everyone, Jaco smiled, though everyone with half a brain could tell it was forced. We'll have to go over this one more time, but I think we certainly improved. We may need to go over a few things. And as she continued, number 3 was showing around his new guest. Nene recognized Akane immediately. His short, bright red hair and serious expression were a dead giveaway. He was looking amongst them, and if she knew anything about Akane, that he was most likely searching for Aoi. Standing beside Akane was probably the most handsome man Nene had ever seen. He was tall, blonde, with piercing blue eyes. He looked like a fairy tale prince. By the side, there was something vaguely familiar about him. Something she couldn't quite put her finger on. Maybe it was his name or something? She couldn't quite remember. As you can see, rehearsals are on its way for our new production of Hannibal, number 3 said, leading them up to the stage. Everyone gather round, number 3 said. There was a buzz of whispers from the cast. Ladies and gentlemen, and as he said this, the crowd grew quiet. I understand that for some weeks there had been some rumors regarding my imminent retirement. Well, I can tell you that now that those rumors are true, and I am proud to present the gentlemen who now own the Opera Populaire, Monsieur Teru Minamoto and Monsieur Akane Aoi. Hearing his name only worsened her agitation. Where did she know him from? Surely she wasn't that absent-minded. She opened her mouth to ask, but number 3 spoke before she could even formulate the question. Gentlemen, he moved past to reveal Mitsuba. Signor Sosuke Mitsuba, our prima donna for the last 5 years. Of course he is, Teru smiled, shaking Mitsuba's hand. His smile was blinding, much like the sun. I've seen all your greatest roles, Signor. And so you're not Signor Natsuhiko Hyuga, our leading man. Natsuhiko had one of his signature dopey smiles as he took Akane's hand. Charmed, Akane said. It was clear his mind was elsewhere. If I remember correctly, Mitsuba, Teru said, your character, Elisa, has a rather fine aria in the beginning of Act 3 of Hannibal, and I was wondering, Signor, as a personal favor, would you oblige us with a private rendition? Of course, you are well in your right to object, Akane added. Nene would have sworn that Mitsuba was glowing. He reveled in the attention, and even more so from people in power. As my manager commands, he beamed. Madam Jaco! Jaco rolled her eyes and the piano out to stage. As my diva commands, she said with as much faux compliance as she could. Will 2 bars be sufficient introduction? 2 bars will be plenty sufficient, Akane said. Mitsuba proudly strided to the piano. Nene wondered if it was healthy to have an ego this big. He did a couple lip drills and quick warm-ups. Nene knew it was just a show off, seeing how his voice should be plenty warm from the performance he did moments before. Once he was finished, Jaco began to play. Think of me of me fondly when we say goodbye. Mitsuba's voice was not only powerful, but ornate. His vibrato sounded like he was singing calligraphy. Remember me every so often, promise me you'll try. And on that day, that not so distant day, when you're far away and free. The way that everyone watched him, it was as if he had cast a spell on them. If you ever find a moment, spare a thought for me. Think of me. It happened so fast. The change from music to screaming. One moment, Mitsuba was singing, and the next moment, the backdrop replaced him. Natsuhiko had been the one to warn him, but it was Teru who had acted. Teru picked him up and swung him away from danger. It looked like the fairy tale moments Nene dreamed of. Or at least it would have if Mitsuba hadn't tripped. It's him! It's the Phantom of the Opera! Aoi screamed, pointing towards the rafters. The rest of the ballerinas burst into hysterics at the sound of the name. Heavens, can we show a little courtesy? Teru turned to Aoi. Not bothering to wait for an answer, he turned to his focus to calm the frantic ballerinas. Mademoiselle, please, Akane said, softly taking her hands. What are you talking about? This has to be Fuji Sutsu's doing. He's in charge of the flies, number 3 explained. Tsuchigimori, get that man down here! And within seconds, Fuji and Tsuchigimori appeared. Fuji, for God's sake, what is happening up there? Number 3 snapped. Please, monsieur, don't look at me. As God's my witness, I was not at my post, Fuji said. I called him down here knowing there wouldn't be a scene change, Tsuchigimori insisted. I was with him. There's no one there. Unless we forget about the ghost. It has to be the Phantom of the Opera, Aoi insisted, her eyes wide with fear and excitement. Aoi, darling, there has to be a more plausible explanation, Akane said. Mademoiselle, please, Teru said as he helped Mitsuba up. These things do happen. These things do happen, Mitsuba repeated softly. His eyes were cast to the floor, his hair in his face. He was visibly shaking. These things do happen! You've only been here for 5 minutes! What do you know? These things have been happening all the time! For the last 3 years, these things do happen! Did anybody do anything about it? Not the first, not the second, and not number 3, and certainly not you! Mitsuba pointed an accusing finger at Teru. He had tears in his eyes. What will it take for him to drop the chandelier on their heads? He was silent for a moment. These things do happen, Mitsuba spat. Well, until these things stop happening, this thing, he referred to himself, does not happen! And with that declaration, he ran out of the theater crying. Mitsuba! Natsuhiko called after him. He turned to look at Teru and Akane. Amateurs. And with that said, he ran after Mitsuba. Well then, number 3 fixed his coat. I'd best be leaving, gentlemen. Make sure to take good care of the opera house, will you? Monsieur? Akane looked at him with wide eyes. If you need me, I'm sure you won't. Number 3 then exited stage left. Au revoir! And he was gone. Teru and Akane looked at between themselves. What had they just bought into? A mystery in the opera house, Teru mused, staring into the rafters. How trivial. I'll solve it. I'm sure Mitsuba will be back, Akane said. Think so, monsieur, Sakura said. Nene had forgotten she was among them. Akane nodded. Nene wished she had that much unwavering faith in Mitsuba, but unfortunately she knew him personally. I have a message, sir, from the opera ghost. Sakura pulled out a letter. There was no amusement in her emerald eyes, though she never wears such an expression. Akane groaned. All of you are obsessed. Sakura paid no mind to him, opening the note. He simply welcomes you to his opera house, and he commands that you leave box seat number 7 open for his use and reminds you that his salary is due. His salary, Teru repeated. He and Akane looked between themselves seriously before dissolving into laughter. Sakura was not in on the joke. Number 3 paid him 20,000 francs a month, but I'm sure you can afford more with your brother, the Viscount, as the patron, Sakura said, her gaze as cold as steel. I had yet to make that announcement, Teru said. Will he be at the performance? She asked. In our box, he confirmed. Madam, who is the understudy for the role? There is no understudy for the role, monsieur. The production is new, Yato exclaimed. Nene Ashiro can sing it, Aoi interjected, pulling Nene into their line of sight. Nene's eyes widened. What in the world was she doing? The chorus girl, Akane said, unimpressed. Nene could feel the heat rise to her cheeks. She's been taking lessons from a great teacher, Aoi insisted. Really? From whom? Teru asked. Nene felt her heart sink. What does she say? Hanako was her personal mystery that she had no explanation for. He was her angel, but she wasn't sure she could say that to him. I don't know, sir. Nene looked to the floor. Oh, no, not you as well, Akane complained. Can you believe it? Full house and we'll have to cancel. Yashiro, Teru said thoughtfully. Oh, that's a peculiar name. Any relation to the violinist? My father, sir, Nene confirmed. Let her sing, Sakura said firmly. She has been well taught. When she said this, she looked Nene in the eye. Nene had no idea what that meant, but she was too bewildered to really dwell on that. Very well, Teru conceded. From the beginning of the aria, then, Akane said. He didn't look too convinced that Nene could do it, and Nene honestly shared the sentiment. Mitsuba was a hard act to follow. The soft piano that once almost lulled her to sleep was now making her heart want to jump out of her chest. Her nerves were shot, her face must have been a bright red. She was an absolute mess. Aoi wasn't lying, though. She knew this, but one look at Teru and she almost vomited. Think of me fondly when we say goodbye. Nene's voice came out scared and breathy. She turned to look for some sort of way out of this, but some place to run, but Sakura shook her head. This was it. Remember me every so often. Promise me you'll try. Teru, this is doing nothing for my nerves. Akane sounded almost bored. Don't fret, Akane, Teru said, though his eyes were focused on Nene. Nene needed to focus. She needed to put away thoughts of handsome men and opera ghosts. She needed to focus on what she wanted. And she wanted this. She wanted this more than anything. And on that day, that not so distant day, when you were far away and free. Her voice found strength. Music was her first love. She put in the time and care. She had sown her seed. She deserves to reap the reward. Hanako was right. She needed to stop being afraid of the notes. If you ever find a moment, spare a thought for me. Akane was right. 2 bars were plenty sufficient. All it took was 2 bars, and the next thing she knew, she was going over Mitsuba's lines and changing into Mitsuba's costumes. She had even had her own dressing room even. She was the prima donna, even if it was for one night. Nene thought she would lose her nerve when she got on stage. Aoi's whisperings of encouragement seemed to fall on deaf ears. Nene could feel her heartbeat in her fingertips when she was in the wings, but when it came down to it, none of it mattered. And though it's clear, though it was always clear, that this was never meant to be. Singing alone was so different from singing with others. Nene felt exposed and vulnerable, but there was a strange freedom to it, like she depended on nobody but herself, and she answered to nobody but herself. If you happen to remember, stop and think of me. Think of August when the world was green. Don't think about the way things might have been. For once, this wasn't a desperate plea. This was a promise. She will be thought of. She will be remembered. Think of me waking silent and resigned. Imagine me trying too hard to put you from my mind. Think of me, please say you'll think of me, whatever else you choose to do. She hoped if she sang strong enough, her father would hear her. Perhaps if she lifted her voice to the heavens, he would know that his daughter's doing just fine. Better than fine. She was flourishing. There will never be a day when I won't think of you. When she was on stage, she couldn't feel the pressure or the need to live up to Mitsuba's performance. She was being heard. She was singing, and they were listening, and it filled her with a joy that she couldn't explain. Flowers fade, the fruits of summer fade, they have their season, so do we. Nene knew that the finale of the song was coming. She knew that this was the real test. Hanako swore up and down that she could hit those notes. If Hanako was right, this could make her career. But if he wasn't, but please promise me that sometimes you will think. There was a rest. And Nene needed that moment. The longing ceased for that moment. She didn't feel the melancholy of being rejected, nor did she feel the righteousness of proving that she was more than a chorus girl. Nene felt a feeling of peace. No matter if she was prima for the night or 100 years, she found a piece of herself on that stage, and it will reverberate for everyone to hear. And she took a breath of me. After the show, Nene was surrounded by ballerinas who showered her with praises. If this is what they did to Mitsuba, there was no wonder his head got so big. She didn't even have any room to speak as they all talked over themselves. They all had then all of a sudden they grew silent. Nene looked up to see Sakura there. Your song was excellent, Sakura said. Aoi squeezed her hand. I'm sure he's delighted with it too. And you. Sakura turned her attention to the ballerinas who all withered under her gaze. You dance as if I taught you nothing. Such rondejons, such temps de crise. However, there might have been a small sliver of silver lining. There's nothing a bit more practice can't fix. Everyone noticeably deflated. There was no use in arguing with her. If Sakura says they were doing late-night rehearsals, then they were doing late-night rehearsals. And late-night rehearsals were brutal. Come, we rehearse. And with that, Nene was left at her vanity, humming to herself as she brushed her hair. Nene was finally alone. Bravo, Miss Yashiro. Or so she thought. It was so quiet. She thought that she might have imagined it if she didn't hear it as clear as day. She turned to give a lecture about how improper it was to enter women's dressing rooms uninvited, but she found nobody there. She was alone. She could hear her name being called. It sounded like Aoi at first, but when she closed her eyes, it was Hanako. Hey, when did you get so good at singing? Nene nearly jumped out of her skin, only to see Aoi in the doorway. Nene felt embarrassed as if she was caught doing something wrong. Aoi, you scared me half to death, Nene pouted. Aoi giggled in response, joining her as they looked in the mirror. I called your name several times. I can't help it if your head is always in the clouds. Aoi's voice was stern, but her smile betrayed her. Aoi, what are you doing here? Nene asked, eyes wide. I thought you were supposed to be practicing. I am. I looked around as if expecting someone to overhear them in the empty dressing room. I snuck out. Nene gasped. Owie! You know Sakura won't like that very much. It'll be fine. I mean, I'm her star pupil. She gestured to herself, and Nene had to agree. From her hair bow to her perfectly laced point slippers, Owie was the perfect picture of grace and beauty. In a plainer sense, a perfect ballerina. That's besides the point, though. You didn't answer my question. When did you get so good at singing? Owie repeated. I mean, out there you were just perfect. I only wish I knew your secret. Who is this new tutor? Nene knew Owie was curious. Nene also thought her tutoring situation was strange, but if anyone would listen, it would be Owie. Only because you are dear to me, Nene said. I'll tell you. Owie leaned in closer, expectant. My father used to talk of an angel, one who would grace me with great musical talent, and I think he's the one teaching me. Nene spoke carefully. Somewhere in this theater he's listening, and he's a genius, Owie. Nene wouldn't believe it herself if she didn't know better. Nene, sounds like you've been dreaming during practice again, Owie giggled. Owie, I'm serious. Nene, forgive me, but you realize how this sounds. Owie's eyes were now filled with concern. Owie had every right to be concerned. Nene knew that she sounded crazy, and these days she was worried that she was. She'd never mentioned it to Hanako, but Nene swears she sees him everywhere, and not in the way that a lovesick girl sees their love. It was strange the way that she sees him in the corner of her eye, and swears she could hear him. It was all so subtle that Nene thinks she might really be crazy. Like Hanako is haunting her. It's as if he's with me even now, Nene said, her eyes wide as Owie took her hand. Hanako owned her. Hanako even seemed to own her mind. Your hands are cold, Owie worried. Nene wasn't sure how to feel about such statements, whether they were true or not. All around me, Nene said vacantly. Was it a good thing, since it's helped her? Nene knew nothing about her own angel, an angel who she'd handed her voice over to. Nene, your face, Nene, it's white. It frightens me. Owie held her. Don't be frightened. It was then Sakura entered the room. Owie Akane, are you a dancer? Sakura said, her voice even and calm. Owie nodded. Then I suggest you dance. Sakura pointed to the door. Owie squeezed Nene's shoulder reassuringly before leaving. Nene thought Sakura was just searching for her missing ballerina, but instead she slipped her hand in her pocket. Miss Yashiro, I was asked to give you this. Sakura handed her a letter. Once Nene had officially received it, Sakura left. She didn't even give Nene the chance to ask who had sent it. Nene didn't receive fan letters. Nobody even knew she was starring in the opera. She opened the envelope carefully to hear a vague note in an even more vaguely familiar handwriting. The note looked a little hurried, and there was just a few short phrases in its contents, not even a full sentence. A red scarf, the attic, little Lottie. Nene's life was only getting stranger by the day. And scene. Okay, you guys aren't going to see all of this, but I'm telling you, this took effort. This is probably 30 minutes probably of content, maybe a little bit more. This mess took me about 2-3 hours to get done because somebody, I'm not going to say who, but siblings, just would not close their mouths. Anyways, that aside, that concludes chapter 3. How exciting. I sang. I'm not a soprano, but I did sing it anyways because music. And that's how it's going to be. I'm going to keep singing these chapters when there's music. And I'm not a soprano. You know, Christina's a soprano one. I'm an alto too. So it's going to be a very interesting read. And that's why I didn't sing Nene's last form of me, because I Okay, I tried it. I heard it. Voice crack. So that's no. But anyways, thank you for listening. And if you are reading along, thank you for reading. And yeah. Thank you for taking the time to put in the effort to listen to something that I have put in the effort into. I'll see you next Hanako of the Opera Saturday. Hopefully actually on a Saturday, because last time it was on a Sunday. But next time it will be on a Saturday, and this time it is on a Saturday. So, anyways, all that is to say, thank you. And goodbye.